Nat Eliason is our guest today. I'm a big fan of his writing, so when I found out he wrote a book about his experience winning and losing millions of dollars in crypto, I knew I had to have him on the show. On that topic of crypto, why should you care? Well, here's one reason.
And so it's kind of like opening up the financial system to, one, the whole world, and two, making it so that you don't have to deal with these old archaic institutions to get these basic services anymore. You don't have to go into Chase Bank. You don't have to wait, days for payments to clear. You don't have to pay crazy processing fees to do very simple transfers or payments. And if it can actually see its vision of democratizing like finance and removing a lot of this old bloated middlemen, that actually has this really interesting potential impact on like global growth and all of these things, because as we have facilitated financial transactions in our economy over time, the pace of innovation, all these other things has like gone up exponentially along with it.
Hopefully you listen to this episode with an open mind, because to me, there's no doubt that cryptocurrency is something that can have a huge impact on our world. And even if you don't think you're interested in discovering more about it, I encourage you to give this conversation a chance, as Nat has an incredible talent for communicating complex concepts in a clear way. I think you'll dig it. Among other things, Nat and I discussed the fine line between crypto gambling and legit use cases, the future of the crypto ecosystem, best resources to follow if you're interested in going further, and of course, his biggest lessons from winning and losing all of that money, plus his book, Crypto Confidential. And all things crypto aside, Nat always provides some insights that get you thinking. Today, you'll hear advice on how to find fulfillment and success in your work.
Of all the possible careers I could go after, this would be the one where if I failed at it or if I never went after it, I would probably regret it the most. And that can be a useful question, I think, to ask yourself is, if you wouldn't really care if you failed at the thing that you're doing, then you maybe shouldn't be doing it in the first place. And you should go do the thing that you are probably most scared of failing at.
Why it's important to think about creating some unlimited upside situations for yourself, the important influence of language and word choices, and much more. It's all happening in today's episode right now. So buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show, my friend. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. I am so excited to have Nat Eliason on the show. We have several links that you'll hear mentioned in the show. They're all in the show notes. Of course, the main hub for his work, nateliason.com. And he's got a great newsletter. I've been following his work for years. And speaking of newsletters, we also have a newsletter over at Zero to Travel. I write it. ZeroToTravel.com/newsletter. So where you can sign up for that. It's free. If you want to keep in touch off the pod, I send that out once a week. I know you're going to love this conversation. And although sometimes some shows I choose to record aren't so directly related to travel, I feel like this still falls under the umbrella of things to be aware of, things that shape our world, and also things that you may find yourself involved with at some point or another. And this episode is not about getting you involved in crypto or anything. It's just about getting educated, learning about it, and understanding a bit more about what's happening, maybe where it's going, and the like. So I hope you enjoy it. And on the back end, stick around. I'll leave you with a quote, plus one of the biggest lessons I learned from losing too much money in crypto semi-recently. So stick around for that. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Nat. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the other side. Cheers. Nat Eliason, welcome back to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend. How you doing?
I am doing great. It is good to be back. It has been a minute.
Yeah, a couple minutes. 2017. I looked it up. I went back to the post to like see when it was published. A lot's happened since then. Probably the biggest thing of all the things, and we're going to talk about, of course, the book today, Crypto Confidential, which, by the way, was incredible. And I read it in a weekend. I couldn't put it down. And that's saying awesome. A lot because I have 2 kids, and you know how busy it is.
that is saying a lot. Yeah. Sneaking in the reading time with kids gets challenging, especially on the weekends. I found I have to get all of that stuff done during the week now. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The biggest change probably for you is having 2 little ones now. How old are your kids?
2.5 and 1.
Yeah. So you're like pretty much in the thick of the
2 little toddlers in the thick of it. Yep.
Yeah. Well, how has that changed your approach to life, if at all, having kids?
It definitely reshifts, I guess on this topic related to work stuff, it totally changes your relationship with time, I think, in a really positive way, where it's funny, before kids, I didn't realize how much time I must have been wasting or just not using very well. Because, now having them and really orienting my schedule around them and trying not to let work take me away from them too much, and because I don't want to be away from them more than I have to, figuring out how to get everything done really within 35 hours-ish a week has been this kind of like great challenge, where you don't have this long morning to do a 1-hour morning routine where you sauna and cold plunge and journal and meditate and all of that stuff. I guess if you wake up early enough, you do, but you're spending it with your kids. In the evening, you're spending it with your kids. And I think it's almost, there's almost this myth that you need to do all of these huge, big checklisty things to feel very satisfied about your life. And that's what you should be filling your days with. But actually just playing with your kids is pretty awesome. And that fills in a shocking amount of that meaning question that I feel like I and many other people are chasing through work and such before we have kids. And I think that's just been such a wonderful reorientation in that sense. And then when it comes down to what you do end up working on, there's a little bit more of that. Okay, what do I actually want to do, and what could I actually want to do for the long term? Because I think before kids, I only thought in 1, 2, 3 year timelines, but now I'm thinking on more like 10, 20 year timelines. Like, what do I do, the whole time they're at home? And that's been super helpful too, for me to just be like, no, writing is the thing. I'm just going to focus on that and really just try to figure that out. And that's where all of my work energy is going to go now, and has been going for the last couple of years.
Yeah. I think it was a Jack Kornfield interview or something. He was saying, parents were complaining because they didn't have enough time for meditating. And what do you do if you don't have enough time for meditating? And he's like, the kids that is the mindfulness. That is the meditation, is like actually just being the parent. And it's so true. But, when it comes to creative work, because that's a different animal, I feel like I can't just sit down and it's not like knocking out a bunch of emails or something, right? Like I have Fridays, I do my admin days, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to do like my, boring stuff. I don't have to think, and I can put on whatever music and just kind of knock out a list. But it's not the same when you're preparing for something like this, or, so how do you, with writing, at least for me, and maybe it flows for you, but how do you use that time in a way where, does it take you a little bit of time to get into the creative flow?
Yes and no. I've been experimenting with this a decent amount to try to figure out what works best for me now in this phase of life. And I actually got really tactical with it. I set up a spreadsheet and I tracked every single writing session I did for 6 months. I tracked what time I started, what time I finished, where I was, how many words I wrote, which project it was on. And I had it all in this big spreadsheet. And so I could see like my words per hour, and I could see notes on how I felt and things like that. And I had assumed that the best way to get that dedicated, focused writing time was to wake up earlier and do it first thing in the morning before the kids wake up, and then be able to do, other stuff as the day went on. What I found was that I was actually less effective writing that early in the morning than if I waited a few hours and wrote at like 9:30 or 10 after dropping our older daughter off at preschool. And the better use of that morning time was like puttering, doing emails and little things. Or what I found really helpful was what I started calling priming. So I wake up and I might read some of what I wrote yesterday, or I might read a book about writing, or I might just read some of my notes on the book draft. But then I don't do any work on the book. I just read something related to it or read some of the material. And then I spend the next 2 hours making breakfast, getting dressed, getting her to school, doing all of that stuff. And then when I sit down at 9:20, 9:30, I've sort of already done the warm-up work. And so I was able to just go straight into it and didn't need that warm-up period. It had kind of been happening subconsciously over the last couple of hours. And so then by doing that, I could sit down at 9:30 and basically just go and be on until noon. And I'd pretty much always get a really significant amount of writing work done in that time period, whether it's like writing 2,000 plus words or getting through a next big section of editing. It was always like the very, very productive, very focused time. And then I could do whatever else I needed to do with the other half of the day.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, of course, it sounds so simple to use like data to actually make an informed decision, but I don't know about any people listening right now, but I'm pretty lazy with tracking stuff like that. I just don't take the time to do it, but it's smart. I think that the whole like letting the subconscious stew on creative work thing is one of the most underrated, here I use air quotes here, productivity tools around. Like I do this a lot at night too, just like thinking about something or like reading something before I go to bed. It's kind of crazy how it solves itself by the next.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes it takes a few days, but
it just pops in. And it's interesting too, because this is such a widely discussed and observed and, reported phenomenon that you'll pretty much always have your best ideas and your best insights when you're not working on the problem. It'll be when you're off doing something else. You're on a walk, or you wake up in the middle of the night, or you're having dinner, and some background process figures out whatever problem you were working on. And so you almost have to be really careful what problems you feed your subconscious to work on. Because if you're always on Twitter and arguing with people, then the thing that your subconscious is going to be whittling away at is what's a good reply to that annoying tweet that I saw earlier. And that is probably not the highest and best use of that subconscious energy. And so by deliberately putting those problems in front of yourself, especially right before you leave work or right before you go to bed or first thing when you wake up in the morning, like putting that problem in front of you and then going and doing other things, I feel like that's when you get these really great insights. And so I've been trying to do a better job of that before I go to the gym, look at whatever thing I'm trying to figure out in my work, and then don't think about it actively, but let the solution pop into my mind sometime later.
I guess on that note a bit, transitioning to, in your case, becoming an author. And I know, actually we worked together in the past when you worked with Growth Machine, your company, doing SEO stuff. You made this transition. I'm not sure over what period of time it took place, because I've been following your work for a while. Like, I will put all the links in here, but highly encourage everybody to sign up for Nat's newsletters and everything. I've been getting your newsletters for years, and you're one of my favorite writers for sure. And I always get a lot of value out of it. So thank you for that. We'll link up to all that in the show notes so you guys can sign up as well. I'm not sure if you're working on this still, but you had this like idea of creator towns, creating these sort of creativity, like towns built around sort of creative entrepreneurship, I guess you could call it. And then you had like this tea shop you were going to maybe open and that thing. But, I'm bringing this stuff up because it's like, a lot of people's journeys look like this, right? Like you get these ideas and then sometimes they become things and other times you kind of set them aside. And I'm actually bringing this up a little bit selfishly to get some advice because I'm in that stage right now where I'm like, okay, what's like then I can add like one more thing to my plate and do it seriously enough that it can be good. What is that thing going to be? And then you have all these options, and obviously you've made this transition, and I'm just wondering what advice you might have to anybody listening based on your own experience, obviously, for making a transition from either a project or maybe a more professional setting to like more creative type of work. We can start with like, how do you decide on what project to do and what's going to be worth your time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you've got to have the curiosity to start with, right? So, yeah, but I think anybody who's wondering this probably has some of that curiosity already. They might have some inkling that they would like to, try to write a book, or they try to start a business, or try to do something else than maybe what they're doing right now. And there is this kind of like money question at the forefront, which is, how much freedom do you have to go pursue this given your like current financial constraints? And I this is another thing you realize once you have kids is when you're in your earlier 20s and you don't have a mortgage or kids or any of these other expenses, you really are incredibly free to go try things and to experiment and to see what might be a satisfying type of work for you. And I really think the worst thing you could do in your 20s is take like a very safe career, because you'll have plenty of time for that later if that's what you need to do. But it will be way harder for you to like go experiment with things and try new things and figure out if you might like other types of work more. But at any point in life, you can still go try those things. You just have to be a little bit more tactical about how much time you allocate to them. And I do feel like the thing that you need to get a sense of really quickly is this something that I could enjoy doing as my job, or is this a hobby? Because a lot of things can just be hobbies. They don't have to be jobs. You could enjoy doing design stuff for fun. You could enjoy writing for fun. But if you want to make it into actual work, then you need to try doing it in the very structured professional way. Can you be happy waking up every morning and working on writing to hit some word count goal or editing goal by X time, and doing that every single day of the week without fail? Because that will be your job if that's what you want to work on. And you have to make sure that you actually enjoy the job version of the thing and not just the artistic creative version of the thing, because you might not. But then, I think it is this question of, if you're trying all these different things and you're saying like, well, I've been doing this one for 6 months and I want to go try this thing, and I've been doing this for a few months and I want to go try this thing, that's really helpful in the beginning, because you get this wide range of interests you get to explore. You get to try a lot of things. But if you do that for too long, you end up going nowhere, right? You're 6 or 12 months into a bunch of different projects, but you're not hitting that point where you start to get
You just described me right now, Nat.
But I didn't though, Jason, because you've been doing this podcast for 8 years, 9 years, 10 years,
11 years.
11. Okay. I mean, 99.999% of people never stick with a podcast for that long, right? And this was the thing that I realized for myself was, you're right. I have been doing all these different careers. I had worked at a startup in marketing. I had done the SEO agency. I had tried to do this commercial real estate, dying town rejuvenation thing. I had opened the tea company. I had learned programming. I had done all this crypto stuff. I had tried to join a VC fund. I'd been doing all these different things, and I kept starting from zero. And I said, well, what doesn't, or what is it that I do that is very hard for other people to stick with, but comes very naturally to me, besides getting bored and trying new things? And, like you said, I've been doing this blog forever. I started writing online in 2012 and basically haven't stopped since then, and have put out hundreds of articles and newsletters and other pieces of content, and have a relatively popular newsletter. And it was pretty clear that writing was the thing that I enjoyed doing, that I was relatively good at, and that I was getting some recognition and respect for. But it had this big question mark of, can I make the money work there? Because it is a tough career to make a good living in. It definitely can do it as a hobby, and there's certain versions of it where you can make a decent living. You can go be a journalist, you can do a very professional newsletter, but for the type of writing that I enjoyed doing, it was a little murkier. So it was this big question mark. And then this opportunity to write this book kind of fell into my lap, and I felt like, okay, this is the opportunity. Like, this is where I could actually go after it and try to make this work. And, of all the possible careers I could go after, this would be the one where if I failed at it, or if I never went after it, I would probably regret it the most. And that can be a useful question, I think, to ask yourself is, if you wouldn't really care if you failed at the thing that you're doing, then you maybe shouldn't be doing it in the first place. And you should go do the thing that you are probably most scared of failing at. And that's probably the thing you're avoiding doing by doing all these other things, because you don't want to go after the really scary one, because it's safer to do the second or third tier priorities, because if they don't go well, you're not going to feel as bad about it.
Yeah. It can also be hard if you're, I want to say, suffering from imposter syndrome, which we all do in certain stages with different things. I don't know, maybe that wasn't the case for you because you've already validated that the fact that people enjoy your writing with the newsletters and everything like that, but it still took time to get to that point. So when you locked in on a career as a writer, you mentioned that, well, there's the financial piece. I'm wondering, as a philosophy major and somebody who's into, exploring different philosophies and mindsets and everything, is there like financially, is there a certain philosophy you identify with, like FIRE or one of these concepts, or is it more just like a personal, okay, this is the amount? Of course, I'm fishing for advice here for others listening, but we're looking at, is this the amount of money we need to live? And then I want above that. And once I hit this certain number, I can then pursue my career as an author. Or, this ties back in with the book too, because the premise of it and kind of how it all, you started down the crypto journey was like, yeah, you can tell people because you're here. But
yeah, that was a big question mark. Was, it obviously, my wife and I, we have a certain level of expenses. It's not crazy, but we live in downtown Austin and have 2 kids and are, social and enjoy going out and doing all these things. And so that's not an inexpensive lifestyle. And I've done the nomading, living out of a backpack life as well. And I enjoyed that for a time, but it's not how I want to live. And, I really, really like my life here. And, we can rein in expenses to a certain amount, but we still need daycare, right? And we still need a house and all these things. And so there was a baseline level of income that whatever I was doing needed to provide. And, for a while, the plan had been I guess the less generous term for this is like the deferred life plan. You get a certain amount of money and then you'll go do the thing you want to do, which can be, it makes sense sometimes because, yeah, you might need a certain amount of money to try to get something like a writing career off the ground. It might take 3, 4, 5, hell, it might take 10 years for something like writing to pay what you could be making in programming or finance or any of these other fields. But the thing that I've always tried to go after and I've always tried to do with my work is to only do work that has a basically unlimited upside. So most jobs, like most time when you have a salary, you have a very limited upside for your work, because if you overperform, you might get a slightly larger bonus, but that's going to be an extra, 2%, 5%. You might get a raise, might get a promotion, but you're never going to suddenly make 5 times as much in 1 year just by working a little bit harder. And if you're doing certain work like hourly work or a lot of freelance type work, you're going to have that same problem where your upside gets capped a lot more quickly. But if you're, selling online courses, or if you're doing a podcast, or if you're publishing books, or if you're, programming crypto apps and working with crypto companies, you could just like wake up one day and something has finally clicked and you've 10x'd your earnings overnight. It's rare for it to happen in that time period, but it can happen. These things do occur. Like I remember when I was first working on my blog, I was getting nothing, 10, 20 hits a day. This is tiny, tiny trickles of traffic. And then I woke up one day and I had 200 visitors the day before. And then a week later, it was like 300 or 400. And then a month later, it was 1,000 or 2,000 a day. And it just had all the SEO stuff had clicked and it just boom overnight. Right. And I think that always doing work that exposes you to that kind of upside is really like the kind of the best like financial hack there is, because there's a limit to how much you can save. There's a limit to how much you can budget. Obviously, you can't let your spending get out of control and whatnot. But at the end of the day, the only way you have a like very rich life, or the possibility for very early retirement, or all of these things, is by having that high enough top line. Like you could go full Mr. Money mustache and dramatically rein everything in on, I think he was making like 80K a year or whatnot. But most of Mr. Money Mustache's success has come from his blog, not from all the saving stuff that he talks about in the blog, right? And this is no criticism of him. Like he's talked about this too, where it's kind of this funny thing that he stumbled into. It's like the stuff with the unlimited upside is really, I think, where a lot of what people are chasing through these financial techniques, like that's where it's actually coming from, is exposing yourself to those kinds of opportunities. And writing is this really insane one, because most published authors make almost no money from it. They, we're talking like less than a minimum wage salary, like 10, 20, 30K a year. But if you're James Clear, or you're Brandon Sanderson, or you're some of these names that are just always in the charts, you're making millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars a year working basically alone. There's almost no other career where that is possible, because if you want to be making that kind of income as an entrepreneur, you've got to hire all these employees and you've got to like build this business. You could maybe be like Peter Levels and have no employee, but that's, really, really a rare case. If you want to do it in music, you've got all of the other, artists and support and everything around like creating your music. If you want to do it in finance, in almost any other career, there's a relatively large apparatus that has to be built around you that you're also maintaining as well as doing the work. But if you're Stephen King and you put out one book a year, you can literally just sit alone in your cabin in Maine and write that book and ship it off to your publisher, and like that's your business. It's this crazy range in that sense. Which is also, I think, kind of exciting.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So, well, before we move into the crypto stuff, I guess one other question on that front. You mentioned the financial piece, and then kind of the hobby versus job kind of mindset to looking at your choices that way, which I think is great. When you're positioning yourself with those things, and you're kind of like, all right, look, I'm weighing these things, I'm trying to figure this out. What do you think are some of the more important skills for an entrepreneur or a solopreneur to develop? And I would say, I mean, even people might be listening thinking, well, all right, well, if Nat's just a published author now, they just do all the work. And, but that's not really how it works, right? No. You still kind of have to have the entrepreneurial mindset. And so
yeah, totally.
For somebody listening that's either looking to like level up, or they're just starting out and like, they could read books on sales and marketing and, learn about AI, all this stuff. What are the fundamentals to you that you're like, hey, if you get this sort of foundational thing, you're gonna be able to kind of pick different things and use those skills in a variety of ways?
I think the biggest one is honesty about what's going to move the needle, because especially earlier on when you're figuring things out, there's this really strong tendency to believe that there is some secret knowledge out there about how to succeed. And if you find that secret knowledge, then you'll get the shortcut to success and you'll achieve all of your goals. And that's most of what people are doing when they're reading all of these books or, going through all these articles, listening to every podcast, taking every course, going to every conference. They're hoping that this is going to be the one that has the secret knowledge. But you almost always know very quickly what the thing is that you need to be showing up and doing every single day in order to be successful in 5 or 10 years. And as a podcaster or whatnot, that's showing up every day and finding the best guests and doing the best research and, running the best interview and producing it the best for distribution, right? It's those things which are challenging to do well, but the list of things that you need to do is very simple, right? And it's not something that's like hidden from you that you need to go like do tons of digging to figure out that like that's what you need to do. It's like relatively obvious that those are the things, right? Like as a writer, it's you need to show up every day and either write something new or make something you wrote better. And you got to do that every single day for a few hours a day. And if you do that every day for years and years and years, and you are earnestly trying to make it better, like you're going to get somewhere eventually, right? And as an entrepreneur, you're going to have a few more myriad of things that you can do there, but there's probably going to be like, making the product better, like doing something sales related, or it's one of those things that's, again, it's a relatively simple list to find, but the hard thing is showing up every day and actually doing it. And so I think that combination of, the honesty that the answer is probably something you already know, but maybe don't want to do because you're hoping there's an easier route. And then having the discipline to get up every day and do it. That is kind of like the core of every success story you hear. And I think that's a really important question to ask is if you're looking at some realm, you're looking at entrepreneurs, you're looking at writers, you're looking at podcasters, and you're saying, what did they do to succeed? You might be able to find, oh, this person, had this trick or this thing worked out for them. And this person had this thing work out for them. But I think that's the wrong question to ask. The thing that you really want to ask is, what did every single one of them do? Not like, what's the one thing I can pick from each of them? It's what did all of them do? Because that is the thing that you have to do. And every single one showed up every day and kept at it for a long enough timeline to succeed and focused on a lot of these simple things. And so that's probably what you need to do too.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. That one's hitting home because I think part of the struggle for me right now is like trying to decide what is the thing I want to get up and do every day outside of this, especially if you're just starting out. Like it's good when you ask yourself those questions, even if you have nothing going on. If you take yourself seriously and really mean it, like you said, the honesty was the best word. It makes it more real. I feel like even if you have got nothing, it's just like take yourself seriously in a way, like don't not seriously in like a negative way, but take your dreams seriously, I guess.
Yeah.
Would be to say.
Well, and I think being really honest with yourself too about whether this dream is something you want to do or to have done, because a lot of people want to have a big podcast or have a passive income business or have published a book or have learned a language, but they don't want to get up and like do the thing that leads to that every day. And if you don't want to do the thing that leads to it, then you probably shouldn't bother in the first place.
Yeah. Like it's fun to hold up the book and be on the interview, but like if you didn't enjoy making it in the first place,
Yeah. And I think I've heard this analogy too, that there's kind of like two attitudes to running a marathon, where some people do it to just check the box and be done with it, and other people do it with the knowledge that they're going to do a bunch more of them and they're going to get better at it over time. And I mean, like bucket list stuff is fine and good and all, but I do think that you kind of want to be careful about doing too much of the check the box stuff, because that's not how you find satisfying work or satisfying hobbies or satisfying activities, because then you're just like running around checking things off instead of finding the thing that you could wake up and enjoy doing every day. And I do think a lot more satisfaction comes from finding those things.
Yeah. It could be also a good way to, if it is a checkbox thing, it could almost treat it. I like the experimental lens of kind of being like, let's just kind of objectively go through the motions here. Let's say starting a podcast, an example, like do it for 6 months and see if you kind of assess at the end, like, did I actually enjoy that? Was
Totally.
I don't know.
Well, there's another version of this that I like to use sometimes, intentionally or unintentionally, which is get super into something, hit a milestone, and then quit. And then see if you come back to it. Because a lot of times you're just itching to try something new. And so you'll pick up the new thing, you'll play with it until you hit some initial milestone, and then you'll quit and you'll never come back to it. But sometimes you'll quit and then 2 or 3 months later, you'll go, I actually kind of really want to like keep pushing that forward. I want to come back to it. And that's when you might say, okay, like there is something here. Maybe this does have some place in my routine or in my hobbies or whatnot. And I should keep at it, because this could be a longer term interest, not just one of those little like fad hobbies.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good place to dive into Crypto Confidential, because through what I got from reading the book, at some point there was a healthy version of that, and then like an unhealthy version of coming back all the time. Right. I just will say, I think you pulled off a great trick here in the sense that you have a book that has practical, actionable tactics and information that really helped me understand cryptocurrency and get a better understanding of what's going on behind the scenes, and also pissed me off at times because I've been the exit liquidity, which we can talk about. Also making it entertaining in the terms of like the story and how it all happened for you. And yeah, so people get a sense of where you were when you dove into the whole crypto world. Do you want to talk about kind of the intention? And I mean, we could talk about where it went wrong for you later, but just how did it kind of start for you?
It started the way it did, I think, for a lot of people in that time period, where I was kind of fortunate that I had stepped out of the marketing agency at the end of 2020. I was looking around for new things to explore. I was learning programming because I've always enjoyed programming, and that felt like a good opportunity to fully focus on that and see if I could find some work that way, or maybe start a project through that. And then it was end of 2020, start of 2021. And we had, that's such a crazy period looking back on it. We had the stimulus checks, everyone's coming out of COVID lockdowns. It felt like there was just these manias on all sides. There's the GameStop stuff, obviously, and then crypto is taking off. And I had started buying crypto just passively, little weekly investments back in 2017. I open up my Coinbase and I go, oh my God, there's all this money in here. Like, what is going on? And I start looking on Twitter and I see all these people talking about crazy NFTs that they're buying and random tokens, and just kind of convinced myself that, well, if these other people are making all of this money here, then I can figure it out too. And kind of dived fully into it there. And really with this mission of, my wife was pregnant with our first kid. Baby was going to be born in, obviously first it was like 9 months, and then quickly it was like 8, 7, 6, like felt like I was running out of time. I wasn't making a ton of income. She had just started a new career. So we're living on savings, trying to figure it out. And now suddenly we have this deadline with baby coming and have no idea what work is going to look like on the other side of it. And so it really gets in my head that I need to make as much money as humanly possible, as quickly as possible. And this is where you do it. Like, this is clearly where I go right now to make this happen, because it's going to be so much faster than trying to learn programming and get a programming job. That's like a 2, 3, 4 year project, but this could maybe work in like 3 months or 6 months.
So people have a basis for the conversation. Can we do a little crypto 101 here and just give us the sort of, like, for people like, I still don't even understand what it is. It's like hacker stuff. Don't even talk to me about it.
Yeah.
Which is how I felt in like 2013 when I tried to buy some Bitcoin or something. And I was like, this is stupid. There's all these numbers and letters. Forget this. Damn it, why didn't I stick with it?
I
But
know.
that's the way it is. Yeah, just like give people the breakdown on what cryptocurrency is, the blockchain and what's special about it, and just kind of a quick overview. I mean, we don't have to go super deep, but I think it will be helpful for the conversation.
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously crypto, the story has to start with Bitcoin, because that's what there is at the beginning. And Bitcoin was this really interesting innovation in 2008, 2009 of an attempt to create a provably scarce digital asset that did not require any third-party trust. So, the idea of Bitcoin was in the physical world, we have gold and we have cash, which are these mediums of exchange that we can look at and we can see some value, and we know that there are reasons for that thing to hold on to some value, right? Like US dollars are backed by our government. Gold is a relatively scarce resource, so each bit of gold is going to hold some value. But there was no digital version of cash or gold. Obviously, there were like bank transfers, and you could use US dollars in Chase Bank, but there's no like digital thing similar to gold that could be a store of value or a way of making payments. And there were good reasons that didn't exist, right? Because one of the great things about the internet and computers and tech and whatnot is this ability to just like duplicate information and duplicate things. And so if you created like a database and you said Nat has $100 and Jason has $100, you could just add another line to the database and say, well, now, this other person, Fred, also has $100, but like, where did that $100 come from, right? You just kind of like made it up out of thin air. And so this idea that there could be a digital thing that had actual value was a little bit crazy. And the only version that had really existed were video game items, because video game items had some value going back to even the 90s, where some of the first online multiplayer games, there were items in those games that only a finite number existed, and you could show them off to other players. And when the games were very popular, people would sometimes pay thousands of dollars for these items. But that was basically the only version of like digital scarcity or digital value object that existed. And then Bitcoin comes along. And what Bitcoin figured out was, basically two things. One, well, a lot of things, but the big ones were two things. One was, how do we create a piece of software essentially that has provable scarcity? So a lot of people know that there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins. And that's, hard coded in sort of like the code powering Bitcoin. And the only way that would change is if the majority of people who hold Bitcoin and maintain the Bitcoin network all agreed that there should be more than 21 million, which, considering how much that would devalue their holdings, is very unlikely, right? And has not happened in its 13 years of existence now, 14 years. So it's provably scarce. There's this finite number with decreasing inflation over time. And then the other aspect of it that made it really powerful was there's no one person controlling who has what Bitcoins, how quickly they're coming out, how many there will be. It's agreed upon by everybody in the network, and you don't need to trust somebody to facilitate all of the transfers. And that was a really big deal, because with gold in the physical world, if I give you some gold, you don't really need to trust anyone, because like the gold has the trust, because everybody in the world agrees that gold has some value. And so when you and I trade gold back and forth, we know that other people in the world are going to value gold. And we know that we don't need like somebody like the US government to say that, gold has value. It just does. With US dollars, we know that it's like backed by the government, right? And so that's where some of that like value is coming from. But then we have to trust a bank or trust Venmo or somebody to do the transfers for us, right? We need this third party. whenever you're doing anything with money on the internet, before Bitcoin, you needed that third party. You needed Venmo or PayPal or somebody else to help, because there's no way for me to just like hand you cash over the internet. Bitcoin figured out a way to do that, basically by what a lot of people hear as mining, having all of these computers around the world running the network, maintaining it, so that if two people make an exchange, or however many number of people make an exchange, everybody in the network sees that exchange at the same time. Everybody reports it at the same time. And if you and I tried to submit a fake transaction saying that, like, Nat gave Jason 1,000 Bitcoin out of nowhere, it would get rejected because nobody else would see that, right? So everybody's reporting everything at the same time. It's got this like strong trust layer to it. And so we can actually like have this digital cash equivalent. So that was kind of like a big part of what Bitcoin brought to the table. Moving money around the world in something that's like provably scarce, similar to gold, and being able to transact with individuals or businesses online without trusting a third party like a bank or a payments provider to do it. That was awesome. and like not fully appreciated, I think, for a long time, because you had this third challenge of anything like gold is only valuable if everybody else agrees that it's valuable. So in the beginning, like in 2010 or 2013, it wasn't clear that anybody else was going to take it very seriously, right? And so it had these run-ups. It went to 1,300 or whatever in 2013, but it was still a pretty small community of people who were bought in on it. And now you fast forward to today, and BlackRock has said they want to own 15% of the Bitcoin supply. And you've got a dozen Bitcoin ETFs trading on American stock exchanges, and like people are putting it in their retirement accounts. It's like that adoption is actually incredible. I mean, that's amazing that it's gone from something people were just playing with on their gaming computers and screwing around with, to BlackRock making ETFs out of it and people putting it in their retirement funds. In the bulk of it's happened in 10, 11, 12 years. I mean, that's wild. But that's that's kind of the Bitcoin side of it. And then you have this whole other industry beyond it of like the broader cryptocurrency industry, which is using those two core ideas of, trustless transactions between people who don't know each other on the internet, and fully visible code powering some sort of ecosystem. What else can we do? And that's where really the next big innovation was Ethereum and the Ethereum blockchain. Because what Ethereum did is they said, okay, we have this core blockchain innovation from Bitcoin, which is what allows these like trustless transactions, allows us legibility. What if we allowed you to build anything on that, not just a payment system? And so with the Ethereum blockchain, you could code really any kind of app, anything that exists on the internet today, you could rebuild on Ethereum. And you might ask, okay, well, like, why would anybody want to do that? And a big part of it is that it's hard to realize how entrenched our trust in third-party applications has become, and how much faith we have to put in the financial system to not screw us over. So, on one end, you think about something like a photo sharing app on your phone, or a photo storage app on your phone, right? Like Google Photos. I love Google Photos. Wonderful app. It just like uploads all of your photos, saves them in the Google Cloud, and then you can access them wherever. And they've got, face recognition and all this cool stuff. But I am trusting Google not to just kick me out of the app, or take all of my photos, or delete all of them, or do any of these things. And I have this analogy in the book, which is, if you had an old point and shoot and you went to the drugstore and you got your photos developed and you took them home, it's not like a Kodak employee could break into your house and steal all of your photos and say like, screw you, like these aren't your photos anymore, and run off with them. But Google can do that, right? They could just decide that these aren't your photos anymore, I'm taking them and running. And that's kind of a crazy thing that we just like accept living in this internet world. But you could rebuild an app like Google Photos on Ethereum that gives you all of the same benefits of a Google Photos app, but where you actually still own all of the data and you still have full control over it and you're not outsourcing it to a third party. And so that side of it gets pretty interesting. And then you've also got the financial side of it, where instead of just replacing gold with a digital version like Bitcoin did, we can actually replace the entire Western financial system with a more digitally native version built on these blockchains and using these cryptocurrency tools. So, I mean, on Ethereum today and, its derivative chains, you can basically receive your paycheck to Coinbase or whatnot, have it converted into a cryptocurrency like USDC, which is a US dollar coin fully backed by US dollars in a bank account. And then you can have that sitting in a Ethereum savings account of sorts where you're earning 3, 4, 5% interest. And because other people are like borrowing those dollars to go invest or gamble or whatever else with them. And there are platforms that offer that have tens of billions of dollars of deposits in them and have been, running flawlessly for 3-4 years, allowing people to actually have access to what would be which would be like a financial setup that you might only have in a very developed Western country, right? Like Americans especially don't realize how good they have it sometimes. The fact that you can just walk down the street, go into a bank, deposit your money, move it around, have it all be protected and safe is like incredible. It's such a massive privilege. And you've got all these other people in the world now who could just put their, take their local paycheck, they're getting paid in Argentinian pesos. They convert it into USDC, and then they put that USDC in one of these savings accounts on Ethereum. And now they're using the US dollar. They're not subject to their local inflation anymore. And they can do a lot of things online with it that they would be able to do if they were American citizens getting paid in dollars. And so it's kind of like opening up the financial system to, one, the whole world, and two, making it so that you don't have to deal with these old archaic institutions to get these basic services anymore. You don't have to go into Chase Bank. You don't have to wait, days for payments to clear. You don't have to pay crazy processing fees to do very simple transfers or payments. And if it can actually see its vision of democratizing like finance and removing a lot of this old bloated middlemen, that actually has this really interesting potential impact on like global growth and all of these things, because as we have facilitated financial transactions in our economy over time, the pace of innovation, all these other things has like gone up exponentially along with it. And so now we're just to Ethereum. And now you've got like all of these other coins, right? Which it kind of like it gets less, it goes very quickly from really interesting, potentially world-changing innovation to stupid gambling shit really quickly. And that's the line that I think is the hardest for a lot of people to draw, because you see Come Rocket 420 going from 0 to $100 million. And you're like, this is stupid. Like, why? What the hell is crypto? This is dumb. And I talk about this in the book. It's like, yes, a lot of it is stupid gambling shit and should not be taken seriously. But there is also this like very real and very cool side of it. And you kind of have to learn how to tell those two apart.
Yeah, this is the crux of it, right? I mean, well, the tagline of the book, winning and losing millions in the new frontier of finance. And so parsing those two things out and trying to find the place to go within it to insert yourself into the ecosystem, let's say. And I mean, some of the things you wrote about, it just seems like a no-brainer after I read it, but it wasn't beforehand, like the crypto influencers, for example, like you said in the book. I should say I'm quoting the uncorrected proof. So I don't know if this is going into the final.
It's pretty much
edition,
right on. Yeah.
If someone actually knows how to make money in the market, they won't share those secrets publicly, which of course begs the question, well, then how do you find a way in? And I mean, your way in was kind of interesting through the network. And I think it's like one of those great examples of I mean, you could say this is a bit travel related, but putting yourself in a physical place where a certain thing is happening, I think that can be really undervalued. And you can look at like people that, moved out to Silicon Valley early because that's where all the tech stuff is happening. You could say, well, I work remotely now, it doesn't matter. But there is something to being around a certain scene, let's call it. And Austin, certainly technology and people that are kind of thinking a bit forward thinking and things like that. We have this in common. I lost some money on crypto as well, about the same amount as you got stolen. And that goes back to what you were saying. You're like, you can keep these at institutions and, you can earn a percentage, but that works until, something collapses and then
until it doesn't.
And then, they're trying to get that money back now. So, I won't bore you with my own personal financial crisis with crypto. Gotten some of it back, but, it was crushing in many ways. And because I am somebody who's, I see the vision like you described, but I had a hard time. And it's not like the institution I was with wasn't backed by major financial institutions, but I was a week away from moving it to a Norwegian institution that was sort of like their version of FDIC insured. So if something happened, it would be all good. When you lose crypto, it's just kind of gone. And that's the terrifying thing. We could get into some of your advice for people that are like, now they've listened and they're like, wow, this sounds really interesting and scary at the same time. I totally relate. We can get some of your advice for like where things are at now, where you see opportunities. But first, I wanted to get your take on like some of the lessons you learned losing the money and then making millions and getting involved. Like, I don't know if you were before that somebody that would like go to Vegas and, take like $5,000 and put it on because it's what you were describing in the book and how it sort of went down was like, wow, like Nat, man, you really went for it, like to learn the coding. And then you coded something that, I mean, you can explain it, but basically you were responsible for holding like a massive amount of money. Your code was that you coded, and you were doing all this with like people you didn't even know who they were. And it's just like this is, I don't know if this is you, if this is just like, or if you just like, were like, I'm just in this to win this, and whatever happens, like we're either going to just talk about the experience of the winning and losing millions and what you learned from it.
It's kind of crazy. I mean, I'm not a go to Vegas and throw 5,000 on black and see what happens. And, I'm generally very risk averse, actually. And one of the things that I learned in this process was that if you're like day trading Dogecoin, or you're doing, today it would be like buying these meme coins on Solana, that to me was a really risky way to try to like make it in the industry, because you could lose everything doing that too. And the reason I ended up focusing on programming and trying to work with a team is that if you actually built something and you got paid in tokens or whatnot, you wouldn't be putting capital at risk in the same way you would be if you were like trading and gambling. And so that felt like a really great way in. But I mean, when I started playing around in this crypto stuff, I was excited about making a couple $100 a day, right? That was like a really awesome day. And then 8-9 months later, like you said, I've been working with this team and I've written the code for them. And now there's $100 million in the code
That's insane,
that I wrote.
Man. That's just so crazy.
And I mean, like, I'm not an experienced programmer. I'm not like a professional. That was just how it was back then. And that on the one hand, that is an insane amount of money, and it sounds like a lot of money. And there were things getting that much money put into them every day in that time period, because people would move it from one thing to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing really quickly. And it really, just came out of nowhere. And when I had written that code, it was like, okay, I'm going to do this. It's a freelance project. They're going to pay me some of their tokens. The tokens might not be worth anything, but I'll get my feet wet. And then maybe I can get like a gig with a bigger company or a bigger team after this based on this experience. And then those tokens that they gave me at the peak of the craziness were worth like $13 million. And like, I didn't get to cash out anywhere close to that because, they were locked up and there wasn't enough trading liquidity and all these other problems. But yeah, it was like a day where I woke up and rolled over in bed and I looked at my, crypto net worth calculator, and it was past 10 million. And you would think that when you started started in the tens of thousands of dollars, and now suddenly you're over 10 million on paper, you would go, holy shit, this is a mania. I need to get out right now. I need to sell everything. And that's not what I was thinking. I was thinking, well, this is just the start. It's going to go to 100. If I hold on a little bit longer, this might go up to I might get to 50 million or 60 million or something like this. I can't sell now. I got to stay in it. And so even though I'm not the go to Vegas guy, once I saw those numbers start going up, it just totally took over, and all reason left the building. And I think part of the problem was, like you just said, you got to go where the energy is. You got to go to Silicon Valley. And the version of that in crypto was living in these Discord chats and being in Discord all the time and talking to other crypto people constantly, and sharing these feelings and these wins with other crypto people. And everybody's drinking the same Kool-Aid. I'm not talking to any normal finance people or normal anyway. I'm only talking to crypto people. And so all of us are convinced that this is still just the beginning. And if we keep holding out, it's just going to keep going up, and we're all going to be retired. Our children are going to be retired. We're going to buy the big lake house out in Austin, and we're done. Right. And of course, none of that happened because we rode most of it just all the way back down, or could never get the most of it out. And that was a useful, I think, experience to have and to remember for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I mean, well, on the travel side of things, it sounds like you used this trip to Italy to kind of wipe the slate clean, because you were at the kind of coming down from that. And you said, quote, "The moment I got a taste of potential massive wealth, I lost myself, lost sight of what matters. And now the rest of my life, and most importantly, my marriage, was suffering for it." And it sounds like it was, a pretty emotional time.
Yeah.
For you.
Yeah. It was really hard, really emotional. And I thought that was important to convey in the book too. And I think that's the part that surprises some people, but that they also end up really enjoying, is that it's not just a money book or a crypto book. It's really a pretty personal story. And I know a lot of people who went through similar things in that time period, where they might have been up a ton of money on paper and they never cashed it out and wrote it back down. And that created all this other stress and challenge in their life. And there's a lot of shame and embarrassment that goes with that. And I know that there are hundreds of thousands, millions of people around the world who had some at least micro version of that experience. And I thought it was important to capture that too. And also just tell anybody else who has something like that happen, hey, you're not alone. It's okay. A lot of us made bad mistakes during that time period, and hopefully we all learned something from it.
Yeah. Is that last point the thing does that help with being vulnerable as a writer? Was that part hard for you? Did you have a hard time with that?
I think it wasn't as hard for me. Since I started doing my blog, I've always leaned a little bit more in that direction. And so I've just gotten used to it over time. I also really feel like that's one of your most important jobs as a writer, is to let other people know that they aren't alone in some of these darker feelings they might have that can feel very lonely. Because I think everybody puts on a certain air of confidence and stability and having it all together. And you look around and you see everybody else looking like they're, very stable together, whatever people. And, certainly some of them truly are, but almost everybody is harboring some, insecurities or fears or regrets or things that they might feel like only they feel, right? That they might feel like, some part of them is a little broken or something's, wrong, or they don't want anybody to know this about them. And I do think that a lot of what great writing does is it tells other people that they're not alone. That's one of the biggest jobs of a writer, is to, put those thoughts out there. And so even though it's definitely hard, and it's a little weird to imagine if this book sells incredibly well, if it sells 1 million+ copies, and all those people are reading about, these fights that my wife and I had, like that. There's a bit of it that's scary, but it's also, I think, very rewarding to know that if there's even 10 couples out there who read some of that and go, okay, like it wasn't just us, that kind of makes it worth it. And I think is a really important job for writing, especially a story like this.
So future of crypto, and we can preface this with the, we're not in this isn't investment advice.
Not investment advice. Yeah.
Insert legalese copy here. Where is it at now? What do you think? I mean, chapter 7 in your book is there are always some ways to make money. So what are some of the ways you'd consider looking into now?
I mean, and I say this in the book too. It's like you if you're going to try to run back something like what I did, you have to be 100% in it. It's got to be minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed, you're in the Discords, you're in the Telegrams, you're learning everything, reading everything, fully immersed in the stream of information. Because if you're not, then you might buy the right thing. That's actually not the hard part. The hard part is knowing when to sell it and knowing when the music is stopping so that you can get out. Because a lot of people buy the right thing at an okay time, but then they hold on to it way too long, or they sell it way too quickly. You really got to be fully in it if you're going to do any of the gambling, speculating, really aggressive, trying to find early things before they're public knowledge. And if you're not going to do that, like just hold Bitcoin and Ethereum and maybe Solana and don't look at it.
Just hold it like as if you would a Vanguard index fund.
Yeah.
Like just don't sell it.
Yeah.
Just hold on to it.
Just hold it. Because I mean, at this point, I feel very confident that Bitcoin and Ethereum are going to be parts of our financial infrastructure in 10, 15 years. And, I think USDC is definitely going to be a part of it. If I had to pick a third that would have some role, it would probably be Solana, but my confidence goes down pretty significantly once we get, past Ethereum. And, it's just so hard to say what of the other stuff is still going to be around. So if if you're bought in on the crypto idea, like, honestly, I tell people to just do what I did, where as soon as I got curious and as soon as I felt like there was something here, I just went to Coinbase. I set up an automatic weekly buy. I think it was like $100. And every week, $100 would come out of my checking account, go into Bitcoin. And that just ran for 4 years, from 2017 to 2021. And that became a pretty significant amount of money that then let me go do all this other stuff with. I mean, it was something like just doing those little weekly buys for that 4-year period back then turned into like almost 2 Bitcoin, which was, not a ton of money when I started doing it, but became a lot of money really, really quickly. So yeah, just, put on autopilot, don't look at it, don't think about it, or quit your job, get loaded on stimulants and just go crazy. Those are your options. Don't do anything in between those two.
Go completely mental or just final. Outside of your book, which resources you mentioned, the Discord channels and this and that, and this can be ever evolving, but are there 1 or 2 core resources that you're like, listen, I heard this interview. I get what Nat's saying. I get the vision now. Like I'm curious. I want to explore it a little more. I want to go next level. Where do you go for that?
The Bankless podcast is really, really good. Those guys talk about a lot that's going on in the industry. It's a little more Ethereum focused, but there's also just more to talk about there just because there's a bigger infrastructure of like stuff being built. It's like Bitcoin is almost this perfect innovation because you don't need to do anything to it. You don't need to change it. You don't need to build stuff on top of it. Like Bitcoin is just awesome and complete as it is. And then you've got like the BlackRocks and the Citadels of the world trying to build the new financial infrastructure on Ethereum. And so if you're curious about like that side of it and all the new apps and things, like Bankless Podcast is wonderful for that. There's a YouTube, if you really want to understand the technical side of some of this stuff, like how is this whole decentralized finance world working at a very detailed level, there's a YouTube channel called Finematics that's fantastic. And then the last one I'd say, if you really want like to be in kind of the stream of information, if you go to my Twitter profile, I have a public Twitter list called Helpful Crypto Twitter that a lot of people follow, which is just like some of the biggest names in the space talking about what's going on and their takes and, talking about new launches. And none of these things are going to give you alpha. None of them are going to give you like a trading edge, but they're going to help educate you about the space so you can like start to get a sense of what's going on and what's being built, which is a great place to start.
Okay, cool. You have a very helpful resource on your website. You've read, well, probably more than what's on the list, but you have over 250 books, and your notes from the books and kind of what you took from them and a rating. And I think that's really cool. And I'm always looking for new stuff to read. But I'm just wondering, off the top of your head, we can link to that resource, by the way. Are there, 2 or 3 books like you say everybody should read these, or these, you're going to get value out of these no matter who you are, that come to mind? I guess, of course, this could change. Like I could ask you the same question tomorrow and that could change, but just curious off the top of your head, what stands out?
Crypto specific or just books?
No, just anything.
Books.
Yeah.
The first one that always comes to mind is Finite and Infinite Games. I just love that book so much. It's weird, but it just clarifies, this dichotomy of playing finite games, playing infinite games, how you show up in the world, how you show up with other people, how you show up for work, that I think is such a wonderful philosophy that you can pretty quickly digest. It's a short book and then take with you. So that one's really always the first one that comes to mind. I love Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. I think that's just understanding that idea of anti-fragility and, how different things respond to stressors, understanding like solving problems by removing things instead of adding them, understanding black swan risks, like all of those frameworks are so helpful as an operator in just like the world today, especially in the type of work that you and I are interested in, and listeners of this episode are going to be interested in. And then if I was going to pick a third one, let's see, I can roll around and look at some of my favorites here.
By the way, how does it feel to have your book up there on the shelf?
Oh, it feels pretty cool.
Must be awesome, right?
I love it. Yeah. I'll say one that's coming to mind right now, just because I think this is such a useful tool to understand, is this book, Words That Work by Frank Luntz, which is, he was a political strategist and advisor to multiple presidents, and his whole job was to help them create words and phrases that would change the public's minds about things. And so he's the one who invented the term climate change. And he invented it because this was during the Bush presidency. Everyone was talking about global warming, and global warming sounded scary. And so Luntz told Bush to start calling it climate change, because climate change just sounds like weather. It sounds like something more natural, and it's a way to make people less concerned about it. He's also the one who came up with the term death tax, because if you call it an inheritance tax, then it sounds like something for rich people. And then people are like, yeah, inheritance tax, good. Like we don't want rich people to like stay rich. But if you call it a death tax, everybody dies. And it's like, oh, so I have to die and I have to pay the government money? Like, fuck that. No way. I hate the death tax, right? And the whole book is about that, about how you can tweak little ways that you say things to change people's minds. And yes, you could read it from a strategic point of view to use it yourself, but I think people should read it to understand how they are being influenced by the things that they read and digest. Because once you kind of understand the power of very subtle word choices, you start seeing it everywhere. And it's a really, really useful lens to have for media consumption, social media consumption, news, everything, because you'll start picking up on it everywhere.
Yeah, that sounds fascinating. Yeah, sometimes it feels like semantics, and other times it feels like, okay, this is the most powerful thing you could do with this phrase. Like the climate change was a great example. Are we living in a simulation, Nat?
If we are, I don't think it matters. Like,
yeah.
I understand
you're
that
a
the
gamer,
math
right?
says yes.
Then we're in a multiplayer game. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if at the end of life you wake up and it's like that Rick and Morty episode where he's playing out the guy's life and you just pop out of the machine, you're like, whoa, I reached, level 80 in that version of Nat's life. Like, that would be cool. But I feel like the maybe like the Buddhist version of living in a simulation is a little bit more compelling, that there might be just some weird relationship between consciousness and the physical world that is impossible for us to understand. And we find something out related to that when we die. I don't know. Or this could all just be cope for how impossible it is to imagine no longer being conscious. I don't know, but I studied philosophy in college, and my big problem with philosophy was that a lot of it just feels like a waste of time, where it's like arguing over, what does it mean to actually know something? Like, well, it has to be true, and you have to be justified in believing it's true. And well, something could be true, and you could have justified belief that it's true, but you could still not call that knowledge because you believe it for the wrong reasons. And it's like, whatever, it's like the sun's going to rise tomorrow, and I feel pretty confident that I can rely on the sun rising. It doesn't matter if it's induction versus deduction for so much of this stuff. Like, I'd rather focus on, how do I get better at writing? How do I be a better parent? How do I worry about things that matter? And, if I wake up in the simulation at the end, awesome.
What's the biggest lessons having kids has taught you so far? Not work related, just through your interactions with them.
I think it's what you hinted at earlier. It's this mindfulness that, a lot of the real joy in life just does come from being in the moment and being silly and not worrying about a calendar event or worrying about some project or whatever. It's just rolling around on the bed and being goofy, and that is a very happy life. And that might actually be all that you need, which is a scary thought for very driven people and people who've been driven people who've been rewarded handsomely for being driven. But it might actually be that simple, which is a pretty powerful lesson to get and to be reminded of.
How are you using AI right now, if at all?
So the main way that I'm using AI now that I'm finding pretty powerful is as an editor and as a way to help with editing my fiction writing, because I've gone really deep down figuring out fiction writing now, and I've been working on a sci-fi novel, and AI isn't great at doing the writing for you yet. I think it will get really good at it, but it can be a very powerful editor, and it can really, really help surface things that you need to go out and learn more about and improve on. I think I've been able to learn fiction writing a lot quicker than I could have otherwise if I didn't have help from Claude especially. And if anybody wants more on this, my friend Nathan Baugh, Baugh on Twitter, has been sharing a good amount of how he's using AI to help with his fiction writing. And he has some really, really great resources there.
Cool. Just lastly, is there any quote or sort of mindset or thing that you're leaning on lately that's been helpful for you can leave us with, or just any food for thought or last bit of wisdom perhaps? No pressure.
No. The first thing that comes to mind is this idea that I got from Cal Newport that I really love around slow productivity, and that's the title of his latest book. But the gist is that success in a lot of domains actually happens through, kind of like I was talking about earlier, consistent effort over a long period of time, and not these crazy spikes. And, if you write a great book, it might take you 2 years. And during those 2 years, you might have whole weeks where you don't work on it at all, or where you're just thinking about it, or you're doing something else. But that book is getting done. And then at the end of 2 years, it's out in the world, and it can continue selling forever. Right? Crypto Confidential, people might still be reading it in 30 years, which is a crazy thing to think, but it's possible, especially if crypto is a huge part of our financial infrastructure, and people are curious about what were the early days in this industry like. It
becomes a history book.
Yeah, it's here's the story, right? Here's what it was like in the early days. And that's really neat. I've never worked on something before where it might still be valuable to people in 30 years. I don't think my articles are going to have that kind of longevity, but this could. And that makes working on books really exciting to me. Is it doesn't have to be every day you wake up and you check off 10 things. You've got to get your writing done. But if you miss a week of writing, it's going to be okay. You can get back on it, and you keep plugging away, and then it's done and it's out in the world. And I think doing things where you can have that like slow productivity is really powerful, and something I'm just trying to think about a little bit more than being in the frantic day-to-day check pace of work.
Cool. Thank you so much, Nat. I mean, given time differences, you have to go deliver your kids. I have to go pick mine up. So we're both going to jump off. But if you just want to share with people like the best place that they can buy the book, support the book, give them all the details here.
Yes. So Crypto Confidential should be on Amazon or any other bookstore, wherever you prefer to get them. It doesn't make much of a difference to the author where you pick it up. So just wherever you like is great. The audiobook is really fun. If you like audiobooks, I read it and I got really into it, and the director was great, and she was coaching me on, bringing all the emotion and everything. And I really, really enjoyed it. So that's a good option too. And then my articles are at blog.nateliason.com if you want to check those out. And if you want to chat, I'm most responsive on Twitter, just at Nat Eliason.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure. And let's do it again sooner than later.
Totally. It's great to catch up, Jason.
Take care. There you have it, Nat Eliason. Once again, the book Crypto Confidential. Can highly recommend it and all of his work. He's just a great dude. So hope to have him back on again soon. Thanks for listening. I'm going to pull a quote out of the quote drawer in 1 minute. First, just wanted to share one of the biggest lessons I learned from losing some money in crypto. Now, this happened fairly recently when the FTX collapse occurred. I had some money at an institution called BlockFi, which seemed legit, was actually promoted by some influential other podcasters and people. Long story short, I trusted it, and that was the wrong move, I guess. But the lesson I wanted to share here is when I was deciding to invest in crypto. First of all, anytime there's it feels like a mania going on, you're going to miss out on it. That's probably not the time to get in. So that was mistake number one. But the biggest lesson I learned, and the reason why it didn't totally crush me, is that when I was trying to decide how much of this to subject myself to, because I was thoughtful about it, I did some calculations, and I thought, okay, well, if this all goes to hell, I'm willing to risk this amount. And if it doesn't work, then I'm not going to put my life savings into this. I'm willing to lose this much. But, there's a difference between hypothetically being willing to lose it and truly being willing to lose it. And I think I was on the line there. I was truly willing to lose it, but I didn't think it would happen. And when you're taking a big risk like that, and you're getting into something, whether it's a business you want to start and you have to invest some money to get it going, or anything else, it is important to kind of look at, well, what do you have to gain? Like if you're starting a business and you're putting X amount of money in, even if you lose it all, you will probably have learned a lot about business, maybe made some new connections. So it's not all lost. In the case with the crypto thing, I'm gotten some of the money back, thankfully, about 25% of it, and hopefully more is on the way. They're still kind of trying to fight for it and get it back after they collapse. But, that money was truly gone. I don't think I really learned a lot from the experience other than, maybe I should have put it into something safer. But that distinction of understanding yourself and knowing what you're truly willing to lose or to give up, as long as you're okay with that, that can make a risk almost easier to take. And, you could relate this back to travel with somebody who's leaving their job, let's say, to travel the world. And they're like, well, I might be risking my career here. Now, to me, maybe that's not so much of a risk because you can always find other jobs. But, everybody's unique case is different. But the point is, if you're willing to not have that job again, say maybe, we might hire you back if there's a space. You have to be willing to take that risk, and is the upside worth it? And everybody does risk assessment differently, but I just brought this up just to kind of spark some thoughts around maybe some risks you're considering, and perhaps just sharing a little bit about my experience will give you some ideas on how you debate your next quote unquote risky decision, which of course is a subjective term. One person's risk is another person's, everyday average morning. So who knows? But anyway, for what it's worth, there was some thoughts there. I'm going to reach into the quote drawer now, see what I pull out. These quotes come from my little Wisdom of the East calendar, which is something I get every year. It's got like little tear-off quotes. And let's see. This one is from Jiddu Krishnamurti, who said, "What does it mean to be compassionate? Not merely verbally, but actually to be compassionate." These always get me thinking. Okay, thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out with me on this one today. Don't forget, sign up for our newsletter, zerototravel.com/newsletter. If you keep forgetting to do that after this ends in just a second, do it now. We'd love to welcome you into the community there. And enjoy the rest of your day. See you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by zerototravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.